All right, we should be all live and good to go. I want to thank you for joining me here tonight as we go ahead and break down the State of the Union address just last night for 2026. Trump's second in his second administration here. One of the first things I want to kind of go ahead and get out of the way before I get too into the weeds about this is that this is another kind of stream. If you watched the first stream I did the other night, I do appreciate that. I hope you continue to join us here as I definitely look forward to doing these types of stuff more frequently going forward as an alternate to the kind of regular topic videos I typically do on YouTube here. So I actually watched the State of the Union address about maybe 3 times. And because I wanted to make sure, like you watch a movie, the first time you watch it through, you might still pick up 75%. You watch it another time, you pick up 85, 90%. And the more you watch it, the more you kind of pick up on it. So when I was watching the State of the Union address, the thing that was very apparent to me is there was just another reminder that Trump comes from the Hollywood world, the entertainment world. And that was very much apparent in the way that he kind of set up Democrats in various manners. So at the very beginning of the address, he, of course, kind of lists off his administration's accomplishments. So he brings up gas prices. He brings up the economy, the Dow hitting 50,000. He brings up private sector job growth, that all the jobs kind of created through his administration thus far have been 100% in the private sector. He also touted inflation, core inflation, kind of coming down to that 1.7% that was very problematic when he first stepped into office. So you have this large levy of litany of accomplishments that he kind of gets out of the way. But outside of that, he kind of goes right into attack mode, which, as a Republican myself, as someone who voted for Trump, is very entertaining and fun to watch. He, of course, had the little snippet where he kind of prompts everyone to kind of stand if they feel about the American government's responsibility being towards illegal U.S. citizens rather than illegal immigrants. And so he actually sits and pauses. He sits on that moment for a while before he actually, responds and starts picking up the speech again. And so in that, he just makes all kinds of, facial expressions. He gestures towards the Democrats and liberals in the stands on the right there. So multiple times he says, these people are crazy. These people are, they're sick. They are the ones destroying the country and whatnot. And like I said, as a Republican, I love that kind of rhetoric. I love the combativeness. It kind of flares up the base. It flares up everyone's emotions. It gets people riled up. And that by itself in a vacuum, I don't really have a lot of issues with. He very briefly went over ICE and the ICE operations and the mass deportation agenda. Just kind of brushing over the sanctuary cities. And he's probably spent a total of 10 seconds on the deportations altogether, which was quite disappointing. He did have a lot of moments regarding, the one individual who was seized by the state from their family, against the family as well, and was put in social transitioning. Then they came out and were detransitioning, of course. And then they have a whole thing about, who here would want to, ban that going forward. Of course, Democrats don't stand with that. So like I said before, Trump, he's a Hollywood guy. He's an entertainer through and through. He knows how to play to people's emotions. He knows how to elicit them, how to kind of generate and hold them, kind of manipulate them into what he wants them to be. He understands framing. He understands all of that kind of stuff. And so this was just another example of that. And so as far as that's concerned, this State of the Union address wasn't anything I wasn't expecting. One thing that was not mentioned the entire night, I guess ironically, but understandably, was the Epstein files. Of course, it's not a particularly bright spot for this administration in terms of how it was rolled out in the manner that it was, with a bunch, as if you caught the stream a couple on Monday night, This administration, was tripping over its own feet, crossing wires in terms of the story regarding why the Epstein files were not released in the first place. So they kind of mentioned, Pam Bondi saying the files were on her desk, and then you hear them the next day say that it doesn't exist. And then you kind of go hot potato, and now, of course, people are like, oh well, it's already released. 3 million files have already been released, which is only kind of 50% of what is actually there. We're still waiting for the other large chunk to be released there. So like I said, this is not a very bright spot for the administration. So it's not really surprising that they want to bring it up, because if it's the State of the Union, they only want to kind of bring up what they have done and then what they are doing. And so you kind of saw that when they brought up Iran in the latter half of the speech there. He awarded a bunch of special individuals with either Medal of Freedom or Medal of Honor. They had a guy who flew the leading helicopter in the Venezuela operation. They had the gentleman who helped save the girls in the Texas when the floods happened. Of course, Irina Zarutska's mother was there and was recognized. You had another mother who was going through IVF, and that was kind of a little promotion of Trump RX there. And then the single family homes with banning financial institutions from sweeping up and buying all these single family homes. So you had all those kind of people that in regard. You had 2 veterans that were getting recognized there as well, which was very nice to see. And then you had I think the last one was the Delilah, the little girl who was hit by the undocumented immigrant, or the illegal immigrant, was given the license. I think it was in California. And then Trump kind of used it to pivot towards pushing an agenda or a law to kind of ban estates from giving said licenses out. So you kind of go through all that kind of thing. It's actually a decently long State of the Union address, to say the least. But overall, the sentiment that I kind of got in my watching of it was more of the same frustration. This speech was a lot of red meat for the base. And for the State of the Union address, that is kind of exactly, in a way, what you want it to be. You want to kind of re-energize, reinvigorate your base. Say, hey guys, this is what we've done. Let's kind of celebrate a little bit here, a checkpoint, so if you will, in terms of the administration, kind of almost like a pep rally, kind of. And it's saying, hey, this is what we've done so far. This is what we're doing, and this is what we will be doing in the future. He actually announced that JD Vance was going to, like, his pet project, because typically vice presidents have those. His pet project was going to be the looking out for fraud across the nation. That comes from of course, Minnesota, Minneapolis, and Somalia stuff. And so that's going to be interesting to see how that goes. And we did also hear about the assistant attorney general spot that was going to be created. So we're going to see, if any of those spots actually materialize, or if there's any kind of results from what JD Vance was doing at the fraud position now. So I'm looking forward to that. But the reason why I wasn't really beating my chest regarding the State of the Union address. Yes, you're going to have a lot of good moments for the media, for reels, and you're going to have a few things go viral, especially the long kind of ovation for the SAVE Act, which I am by itself, I think, is almost like it's almost like a dead issue, because unless you want to get rid of the filibuster and you just want to push it through, that bill has all the voting reform that conservatives have been clamoring for about 5 to 10 years. You're talking about voter ID. You're talking about proof of citizenship to get those voter ID. You're talking about all in person, very strict exceptions for mail-in ballots there. All of it surrounding the ability to kind of kneecap Democrats going into the future in the first place. So for Republicans, if they don't want to nuke the filibuster, they pretty much should just stop talking about the SAVE Act, because you're not going to get 60 votes in the Senate you're not going to get 7 Democrat votes to go ahead and pass the filibuster there. So unless you're just ready to just go ramrodding everything through, it's really kind of a dead issue, and you really shouldn't continue to beat around on that. I was under the precondition that the SAVE Act also included a provision that would take away the legal immigrants from being counted in the census, as affecting the allocation of electoral votes and districts and all that kind of stuff. But I was absolutely mistaken there. As a separate, I think it's called the Equal Representation Act, that is still currently going through the process of the system in Congress as well. So we're going to see how good that goes. I was on a condition that was in the SAVE Act, therefore I was against the SAVE Act, but being that it's not, I don't really see an issue with the SAVE Act, let alone by itself there. The Equal Representation Act, which would change the census rules, not counting legal immigrants, I think is a bad bill, only because, like I said previously, it's only going to take the wind out of the sails of Republicans in terms of incentives for them to mass deport illegal immigrants. So the reason why I said that this speech kind of gave me the sentiment of the same frustration kind of going thereafter is when Trump is really, really good at, once in a while he'll come sweeping by and he'll even rally up even the most unhappy factions of the MAGA base, those who are, kind of drifting away towards him in terms of support. He always finds a way to kind of rally and corral everyone back in for a little kumbaya moment, say some stuff that, we're all going to agree with, whether it be the SAVE Act, whether it be the, he brought up the fact that Memphis and New Orleans and Washington, D.C. had very low crime because of the federal government's involvement. Well, we should then be doing that across more cities, cities like Chicago, cities like either New York or Philadelphia, these kind of problematic cities that have a lot of crime in them, invoking things like the Insurrection Act. Well, now that they're pulled out of Minnesota, Minneapolis, they kind of ceded ground to the leftists there, kind of laying the blueprint and the template for any kind of agitators in the future going forward, kind of take all the wins out of their sails. So the Trump administration kind of just admitted defeat in that respect, which was a shame and very disappointing to say the least. But like I said, the reason why it's very frustrating is because Trump will rally everyone back to the base. So he'll, get everyone excited, but he also has a very long history of not backing anything up. So, like the GOP is essentially all rhetoric. The GOP talks a really big game, but they don't ultimately really put boots to asses. They don't really put rubber on the road. They don't really get traction on any of their agendas, except for kind of tax cuts. That's really almost it. So whether it's mass deportations, whether it's the Epstein files, whether it's anything else in that regard, you're not really going to see Trump do anything. And that's what's the most frustrating. He will call Democrats crazy. He will call the Democrats like, you are the ones destroying the country. You should be ashamed of yourself. But to everyone in MAGA, or maybe a little bit to the right of Trump, they kind of have the idea. We know nothing's going to happen. He can say everything he wants, but we know that the rhetoric itself is empty. Is he going to go into these cities and these states where the governors and the mayors are openly opposing and infringing on ICE's operations? Is he going to go in there and invoke the Insurrection Act, federalize the state's National Guard to stamp down those revolts? No, he's not. Is he going to force someone like John Thune, the Senate Majority Leader, to bypass the filibuster? He certainly called for it, but the fact that it's not happened leads me to believe that the Republicans see this as an ability, as an opportunity to talk a big game and then point to the filibuster and say, hey, you know what? We said this is what we wanted to do. We want voter ID. We want all these things. But it's the filibuster and it's the Democrats who didn't get on board, who didn't get on, support and pass a filibuster and ultimately pass a bill and put on Trump's desk. It's their fault. The problem with that is you can do that in every other election cycle. This was supposed to be, I said this on Monday, this is supposed to be the last kind of gasp for Republicans, for MAGA, for conservatives. This was supposed to be the last gasp before the Democrats ultimately took power again and finished the job from what the Biden administration was planning on doing and was going to hand over to Kamala. We know what's going to happen. The GOP fear-mongered about it in 24. This is why you have to vote for Trump, because they're going to go after you. The big thing about Trump is, oh, they're not against me. They're just against you. I'm just in the way. You got to have that level of urgency on it. So to see the GOP talk a big game about their agenda with mass deportations, with voting reform, with housing, with affordability, with all of these things, and to see them just die on that rhetoric is very disappointing. It's frustrating. And that's the reason why you have a certain faction of Trump's base, of Republicans, of conservatives, who are saying, I am so frustrated with this administration, with this enforcement, with how things are being done, that I don't feel a drive to go out and vote in midterms. I'm not going to vote for a Democrat, but you're also not giving me a reason to come out in full force in support of your agenda. Because you can talk a big game, but at the end of the day, you only really do what is the most easiest to do. Is mass immigration as existential of a threat as you say it is? Is voter fraud as existential of a threat as you say it is? Is the cultural denigration that we've been experiencing over decades a true existential threat? I don't know. Because it doesn't seem like you're really treating it as such. And so, in that way, it's almost as if they want to just continue to play politics, continue to just bank on automatic safe red districts that aren't going to hold them accountable, making them look stupid, making them look like RNC droids. You're just going to take them for granted, take advantage of their support. Because none of them are going to vote Democrat. And they don't really feel comfortable staying home. So that was my kind of summary of the entire State of the Union. It was great rhetoric. And I wasn't really doubting the rhetoric that was going to come from it. This is Donald Trump. And this is certainly a little bit more combative than I remember Trump being in the first administration. So in that regard, like I said, it was very entertaining. And he did have really good moments. But as always, with Trump, it's a whole lot of noise, but not much outside of that. And so it makes you question their priorities as a voter. It makes you question whether or not they're really serious as a party, as an administration. And the reason why, and like what's the reason? As if, why are you trying to sow discord and divisions in MAGA right now? I'm not trying to do anything. I'm not pushing anything. If you want someone to succeed, if you love someone and you want them to succeed, you want them to be better, you're not just going to kiss their ass all the time. And you surely shouldn't sugarcoat things. Given a false reality, perception of reality that isn't really true, it hurts them more than anything. So if I believe that the Trump administration is doing something wrong, and I want them to be better because I don't want them to get absolutely slaughtered in the midterms, I am going to say those grievances as loud as I can and as early as I can. If you watch it for a while, you'll know that there are a select number of issues that I will refuse to bash Trump on because I support him on those issues. Venezuela being one, the tariffs being one, which he actually mentioned. Also, the State of the Union, kind of looking directly at the judges. I support the tariffs. I supported the Venezuelan operation. Of course, you have gas prices that are coming down. That affects inflation, of course. You have the mass deregulation. And of course, you have the sealing of the border, which is, I mean, it's sealed. It's the best border we've ever had, ever. And so those are things I'll never attack him on. And his highest approval rating was, of course, early in his administration when he was acting as a very strong executive. And that seems like the roadmap for how he wins going forward. So in that regard, you know, I always try to give the optimistic kind of on the bright side sort of things. I don't like only bashing because I want to give like, hey, this is wrong. You're doing this bad. Don't do this. Instead, do this. This is what you could be doing. Going forward, what could Trump do? Trump not only keeps on his rhetoric, right, but being a little bit of a stronger executive. He already signed the tariffs back, which is good. That's nice. And he's doing a dividend for the tax returns. So that's going to be interesting to see how, you know, that kind of affects his approval rating. See if that kind of stretches into the midterms. He has to really watch himself with Iran in terms of popular support. If we get into a kind of conflict, I really don't think that's going to be too popular, no matter what kind of straw poll anybody kind of tries to find. If they pass the SAVE Act some way, somehow, that's going to be absolutely brutal for Democrats. Absolutely brutal for Democrats. So I want to see him invoke the Insurrection Act, reinvigorate ICE going into these cities where they know it's going to be problematic, and don't take no for an answer. If you are trying to enforce federal immigration law, why would you let any state or municipality stop you? It's not like they're trying to enforce a law that's not in the books, you know? This is literally a law that already exists, and we're just trying to enforce it going forward. So there's no real point in it's not Hitlerian. It's not like that authoritarian to invoke the Insurrection Act and to go into these cities and arrest anybody who is directly preventing or inhibiting ICE's operations or actions. It's not like that at all. And so that little line of attack doesn't really hit with me very, very much. And so, like I said, it's just more the same frustration. And if you watch my videos before, you kind of you've heard this sentiment echoed before. I would rather the GOP get slaughtered in 26 rather than 28. I don't want them kind of going through the spell of false idea of what their base supports and what it doesn't. Of course, the GOP voters don't really vote in the midterms anyway, as is. And so you're already kind of taking that into consideration. You have a lot of public pushback against the Trump administration in the public eye. You see people who otherwise may not have gotten into politics on the left publicly, make their voices heard, especially when Charlie Kirk was shot. And then you have all the ICE kind of incidents and whatnot kind of going around. You have kids walking out of schools. And like I said, these might be like a small faction of the left, the vocal, the very loud fringe minority of them. But when I always kind of harken back on what happened with Charlie Kirk. Seeing that happen and the reaction to his assassination was, I don't want to say it was black pilling, but it was almost like a different kind of red pill in terms of these are like the moderate, this is like your neighbor who you're like, okay, we might disagree on politics. We may disagree on marginal tax rates or, abortion or anything like that. But like, if you see a guy who he didn't commit a crime, and to be honest with you, what he was saying at the time wasn't a controversial thing to say. He was opposing a position of the fringe far left with transgenderism. Not like something that's like 80, like 90, 10 in the opposite direction, right? It's not like he's opposing either directly Israel, or he's not opposing the funding for Ukraine, the Ukraine war. It wasn't something that was like radical. It wasn't a radical position to take, and he was assassinated. And so you kind of expected other people to kind of recognize that, at least if they're Democrats or they're registered Democrat or they're liberal, and many of them didn't. And then you had to sit back and be like, okay, this is a kind of opposition that we're going up against. Like harkening back to State of the Union, the right will call the left a cult. They'll call them irrational and illogical, and they'll call them all these things. And then Trump will do these little traps where they say SAVE Act, and then transgender, everything like that. And then he'll call them crazy. He'll say that they're destroying the country. And it's like, why are you, on the one hand, you're saying that they're a cult. They're illogical and they're unreasonable. You're not going to get through to them. And on the other hand, you're setting these traps. And the reason why you set these traps is to make them look bad. And the goal to make them look bad, the reason why you do that is because you're trying to change the minds of someone who is slightly to the right of the Democrats, right? Independents, centrists, center-left people, right? That's not what's going to move that voter. That's not going to convince any Democrats. This isn't the same Democrat Party of Al Gore and John Kerry. Okay? This isn't the Hillary Clinton establishment Democrat Party. The fringe parts of the left, the progressives, have a much larger influence on the Democrat platform, on Democrat Party, on the Democrat base than I think a lot of people wish to either realize or mention or acknowledge, and adjust the math for politics in regards to that. And the failure to do so leads to strategic mistakes. The traps that Trump laid were powerful, but at the end of the day, they will effectively just be cute. Because if it was powerful, then it would actually lead to changes down the road. The reason why it's cute is because it feeds his base, mega base, it's a whole T-bone of red meat. It's a ribeye steak of red meat. But it's not going to swing the pendulum or move the needle in that respect, because Democrats already feel that way. The country is becoming increasingly polarized. So at the end of the day, all you're really doing is you have a line in the middle of where people are on either this side or this side. All you're doing is just making that line a little bit more defined. That's all you're really doing. Is Bill Maher going to see that? And he's going to agree with Trump and say that the American government should, prioritize the rights and the safety and the needs and the whatever of the American people, the citizens of this country, over illegal immigrants. Bill Maher will agree with that. but he's not going to vote for Donald Trump. He's not going to vote for a Republican on a federal level. It's just not going to happen. So all it really serves to do is further entrench the lines that already exist. And that's why it's cute. I wish it were powerful. I wish it were to move the needle, because I don't want the midterms to be a slaughter. But if the midterms have to be a slaughter in order for the GOP to readjust, to reset its platform, its approach, its strategy going forward, so be it. And that's not saying I want Democrats to win. What I'm saying is the Republicans have to get burned. Whether that is a Republican losing to a Democrat or a Republican who, a little bit closer to a third party, a libertarian or an independent, whatnot. And, because people stay home, the spoiler kind of takes into effect a little bit there. That's just what's going to happen. Because if we're playing off of the mindset of 24, we only have 25, you have 3 years left, because you'll have all of 28. Well, you'll have all of 28 because effectively nothing really matters past November of 2028. If a Democrat wins in November of 28, then that little lame duck period virtually doesn't really matter anymore, because you're not going to be empowered to keep it in. So right now, you either have to get a splash of cold water to wake your ass up, or you're going to lead your base, your followers, you're going to lead the Republicans into the slaughter. So that's the impression that I kind of got from Trump's State of the Union address. Like I said, it was a very large sentiment of the same frustration that a lot of us are kind of used to by now. And it's a kind of frustration that's very disappointing, because we've seen Trump do these things. It's not like we're wishing upon a star as something we've never seen before, like a miracle or something. He's done this before. It's not new, right? Like I said, early in the administration, February, March, he was a very strong executive. He was bypassing the courts. He was enacting his agenda. He was enforcing things. He was making things happen. He was signing executive orders like every other hour, it felt like. And it felt like things were actually changing, because they were. Things were changing. And at some point, maybe it was because the administration sprinted a little bit, and then they just kind of got tired. And I think that they did more than they actually did. We never really even deport that many people. A lot of people say, oh, the self-deportations. Millions of people self-deported. Okay. Have you ever heard of that little World War II diagram with the plane? The survivorship bias, right? The people who self-deported weren't like the real pinnacle issue in terms of downstream effects. So, of course, those people, if they were to, of course, stay in the country alternatively, they're going to affect the census. They're going to affect how electoral districts are allocated. So the electoral math in that respect will change for the better, because those people are out, and we are assuming the benefit of the doubt is that they were in Democrat cities or in Democrat states, therefore influencing in that way. They also could be from a red state, for example. But they were probably from blue states because of how Abbott had kind of shuffled them around a little bit. Those who self-deported aren't the ones that are, for example, killing National Guardsmen in Washington, D.C. They're not the ones that are slashing the throat of Irina Zarutska, right? These aren't the people who are hitting Delilah in California. These people are not the ones that self-deported. So it's the criminals, it's the ones that aren't going to leave even if offered $1,000, that are the real crux of the issue. And it seems like once the administration bumps into any little bit of resistance, they're going to fold. And to be honest, I mean, to give them the benefit of the doubt, I guess they put up a decently good fight, I guess. You could have left right after Renee Good, but you didn't. And then you only leave after Alex Preddy. So you at least kind of tried to dig your heels in a little bit, but ultimately you still lost the battle, but the war is still going. But it doesn't look good for mass deportations. And for something like Trump, for someone like Trump, whose core campaign promises was mass deportation, or is mass deportations, he did one half, he sealed the border. We got to get these people out. Just like inflation. Inflation went up under Biden, and it's only slowed down under Trump. It hasn't like deflated yet. And I talked about this before, but the reason, the way forward regarding inflation and interest rates and housing, mortgage rates, everything like that, you have one of two options to go. One, which is the most likely option, is to say, okay, the Federal Reserve will keep rates at an uncomfortable level, but it's not super high, kind of like where it is now, where you're just trying to keep the money supply constant. You're not trying to add any more than's already there, right? And so you're trying to freeze the amount of money that's in the economy already, and you're just trying to grow the economy to meet the money that's already in the economy. Because the essence of inflation is too many monies chasing too few goods. So if you have a surplus of cash in the system, in the economy, you need to produce more goods for that money to kind of sort out and find. And the way you do that is to keep the money supply stable. Don't add more than it's already in there. And then you will just produce the goods, which is why he's pushing for deregulation. He's trying to build the economy, the GDP, so on and so forth. But that's a long game. You're talking years at that point, right? And even at that point, you're still trusting the Federal Reserve to be disciplined in that manner for that long of such a time. I'm not sure if you can really trust the Federal Reserve. But anyway, the other option, plan B to inflation, is to rip the Band-Aid right off. This is like the recession round, right? You're going to increase the interest rates right now, under the idea that you want to, instead of just kind of monitoring and managing the current money that's in the supply right now, you're going to try and actively suck money out of the economy, remove the surplus, get rid of the surplus from the system, so that you have an appropriate level of money for the goods that are currently in the system. So that is going to cause a lot of prices to drop. You're going to have a lot of economical issues in terms of businesses are really going to struggle. It's going to be really expensive to borrow. Like I said, it's going to be an induced recession, and it's going to bring prices down dramatically. Whichever option you choose, the end goal is hopefully the same. You want the buying power of the US dollar to return to what it used to be, which is affecting my generation from being able to buy homes. It's affecting people from being able to make ends meet in the first place. I was just checking the price of gold the other day, and from last year it was about $3,300, and now it's at $5,200. And there's nobody in the entire world who does not like that change more than the Federal Reserve. Because, of course, as the US dollar loses more value, gold is going to become more and more attractive. So, in that kind of scenario, what we are choosing to do is we're going with A. Powell said he's going to keep the interest rates where they are. Might take them down a little bit just to kind of appease Trump, because Trump is really kind of skitzing out regarding everything, even though higher interest rates are actually a indirect complement to the economy. Because if you imagine economy like a fire pit, right? And it's starting, if the economy is as good as Trump says it is, imagine the fire pit kind of going really well with the fire. It's a really good fire. Well, if you're the Federal Reserve, you are gasoline on that fire. The fire is the economy. If the fire is already going and it's going good and it's even growing and, it's not out of control, but, it's a good, it's a good fire. You don't just dump more gasoline on it, because that's going to make it explode. And it's going to, blow up. It's going to be out of control. But if the fire is kind of dying down, or it's having issues catching, it's not really igniting very well, you might put in a little bit of gasoline to kind of give it that extra boost so it can kind of begin to grow. That's what the Federal Reserve and the interest rates are. The reason why you drop interest rates is because the economy is slow and it's having a hard time kind of getting traction. It needs liquidity. So like they did it in the pandemic, because the economy was artificially frozen, paused. You throw on some gasoline onto the fire with low interest rates, and then it kind of starts to revigorate a lot. Sorry for the mic bump. But if the economy is really going, as Trump says it is, it's a roaring economy, right? Dow's at 50,000 after all. If you're the Federal Reserve, the number one thing you don't do with a roaring economy is throw gasoline on it with low interest rates. You keep the interest rates high so that things don't get out of control. You got to keep the train on the tracks. Take into account the inflation that's already occurred after the Biden administration, right? I think it was during the pandemic, the money supply expanded by 25% in like a year or two, at least over the entire administration of the end of Trump and all of Biden. Expanded by 25%. You can't expand a money supply that fast in that little amount of time and expect things to just kind of be chill. So the interest rates are, of course, affecting housing affordability. People can't buy houses because the interest rates are high. That's just kind of the unfortunate thing right now. I think you can change and improve the housing situation without having to, of course, no home buyer is going to want a high interest rate, north of 5%, 6% area. Everyone wants lower interest rates. But if you, attack the supply side of things, of course, things like zoning regulations and things like that, codes, that's all like local issues. And so that's why actually paying attention to local politics instead of federal politics is actually more important, because you actually see the difference in that immediately a lot faster than federal issues, local issues. If you attack the supply side of things, you repeal some of the energy stuff, you, like Trump is doing, you ban these institutions from buying up large single-family homes, that's a good thing. I think you'll see a pretty fast benefit pretty much immediately from that. You're going to see a lot more supply there, because the demand is kind of pretty much always there in a way. Of course, you have hot seasons, cold seasons, but everyone's, you're always going to have a generation trying to buy a house. But the boomers aren't downsizing. The boomers are staying, they're moving horizontally. That's where people, they'll buy a starter house, then they'll go vertical into like a bigger house because they have a family, They might buy another house as a kind of bridge towards when the kids get older, and then once the kids move out, they downsize again. The boomers aren't doing that. The average age for a home buyer in this country is, I think it was 59 years old. The year or the age of the average home buyer 20 years ago was 39 years old. So the same people who are buying homes 20 years ago are buying these homes now. It's the same people buying houses. And if you looked around your area at the cost, the price of starter homes, they're insane. They're not the real true price of a starter home. $300, $350 in some places. Back where I used to live, me and my mom were kind of driving through it. Not a super duper great area. It was still like $250 for small houses in a not super great area. And it's because the whole housing market is kind of right now being held hostage. And it's unfair, and it's all of those things. And Trump has to work on satisfying all sides of the issue. And I wish him Godspeed with that, because he's going to have to pick a winner and you have to pick a loser. But that's really beaten off the beaten path right there. A little bit of a rant on interest rates and housing, of course. But he, like I said, regarding the tariffs, he re-signed a bunch of them, so that's good. Like I said, I'll always support him on the tariff stuff. It almost seems as if like Greenland has become like everyone's kind of forgot about it. It's not really a priority anymore, I suppose. That's kind of dead now. But we have what's going on in Mexico. See how that develops. I said this on Monday night. That's the kind of war on drugs I would support. I would support a military operation in Mexico. Because if there's ever a country that you could reasonably, make valid invading to kind of fix shit up, it's Mexico. It's a country run by the cartels, controlled by the cartels. It's endlessly corrupt. And it's literally on our border. And it's where a lot of our issues are coming from. Countries will go to Mexico and then enter us through there. So you take out the top guy, now there's a lot of conflict going on right now in Mexico. And it's going to affect the resorts. So you're going to see a big revenue hit. Mexico is from that revenue. But I don't want Trump to get squeamish. I think, if you see a shot and you see an opportunity, take it. Because it's going to be in that situation. It's going to be the U.S. government versus the Mexican cartels. And it's in a war. It's going to be a battle that's going to need to happen eventually. I don't see a figure in Mexican politics that's going to take on the cartels as what's going to be needed. So, Godspeed to Mexico, of course. Trump mentioned the Venezuelan action. He mentioned 80 million barrels of oil entering U.S. markets, so that'll see a direct impact, hopefully, on gas prices and the prices of just about everything else there. He mentioned the price of eggs, which is always something that conservatives, mostly because Democrats kind of bitched, moaned, and complained about it at the very beginning. They kind of took that on the mantle of things. So eggs are coming down. They said meat they're working on. So going forward, like I said, I just hope that the Republicans, GOP, Trump, take your rhetoric seriously. We know that you know what you're doing. You're instigating, you're being combative, which I like. I want you to be combative. These are your opponents, after all. And when it comes to those issues like prioritizing illegals more than citizens, or the state barging into a family and separating them and transitioning their child, these are things that are ridiculous. These are unreasonable stances and issues. If you're going to say that they are, treat it as such. And if you do, you reinstate mass deportations. I know it's a pipe dream. I know it's probably over. But nonetheless, I'm just pointing things out here. Bring back mass deportations. If you get pushback, if you have any politician or figure that is outwardly preventing or inhibiting you from enforcing the law, Insurrection Act, put them in jail. For illegal immigrants, you got to go to every business in America, in the country, and say, listen, you have 6 months to lay off and get rid of all of your illegal workers. Once you come back in 6 months, if we still find them here, you will go to jail. If you pass that, then you're going to see a lot of people self-deporting because they're here trying to earn a living. One thing I didn't like what Trump said regarding the mass deportations and the border was that they stopped the issue of them coming in illegally, but of course we want to continue to let them in the legal way. Listen, Donald, we've had lots of immigration over the past few decades, not to mention a huge influx right now. What we need is not controlled, moderate, safe levels of immigration. We need to pause immigration, an immigration moratorium. How long? We can start at 10 years. But right now, I want to make it indefinite until we get a handle on who exactly is in this country. You can't just keep on adding people into the country and assuming that they'll just assimilate. Because if you add enough of them in at one time, they are going to make their own pockets. They will make their own communities. They will not blend in. They won't just mix into the fold. Much like you're seeing in Minneapolis with the Somali community. And you're seeing across New York and all these other urban centers, these urban Democrat strongholds. This is what you're seeing. These aren't your same immigrants that came in the 90s or the 2000s. In the 90s, right? 80s, 90s, 2000s. These aren't the same type of immigrants. We have too many of them in here. And right now, you're just, at this point, you're already saying you don't want to get them all out. You don't want to do the grunt work of getting them all out in the first place. You only want to help the states that ask for help. What kind of help is that? How are you going to be an executive, but only enforce the laws in areas where the people ask you to enforce the law? If it's like, are you serious? You're the federal government. And for a law like citizenship, they are in the country illegally. This is literally the policy that got you into the White House, largely, was immigration, was the border. And now you're just reneging on it entirely. Only going to help the people. You got to ask for my help first before we go in there with the guys. Complete betrayal of the rule of law. So just saying that, you know what, if you give us enough pushback, we're just not going to go in there anymore. You win. Biden let in at least 10 million people, probably close to 15, 20, 25. But we're not going to go in there and do anything. We're only going to go in there to people who ask us for help. So that's gone. Early in administration, they start targeting, workers. It was Stephen Miller who said, go to Home Depot. Why aren't we going to Home Depot? The day laborers. They start doing that. They throw a hissy fit, and it's over. Trump initially says, we're going to go after the workers. We're going to go after the businesses. And then he quickly backpedals and says, well, we'll leave the service, we'll leave the service industry alone. What? Why? Well, we know why. A lot of his donors chimed in and said, hey, don't do that. Those are our people, and we need them. All the contractors, all the hospitality, all the restaurants, you name it. He said, can't do that. Sorry. Take it back. And he did. Corporate interests. That's why we're frustrated. Not to mention the Epstein files. You say you're going to be the most transparent administration? Dan Bongino, Kash Patel, interview. Treating American people like they're retards. Saying, I watched the video. He killed himself. The files are on my desk. Ready to review. The files don't exist. Here's 3 million of them. What? Call you into the Capitol. It was a House Judiciary Committee. They're calling in the Attorney General to ask about an ongoing investigation or case regarding a potential global pedophilia child sex trafficking ring. Pam Bondi says, why aren't we talking about the Dow? Why aren't we talking about the economy? It's because you're not Howard Lutnick. You're not Scott Bessent. I'm sorry, are you Pam Bondi? Are you the Attorney General? Am I, who do I talk to regarding this investigation? Is it not you, the chief prosecutor in the country, going against, supposed to be going after the people who were in the files? The FBI is supposed to be the ones to tell you who they are. Nope. Apparently that was incorrect. Apparently we were all under the wrong impression of who exactly Pam Bondi was when she was going through her confirmation hearings. Guess so. Dumb us. I will give Trump credit on this one. Unlike his first term, where his cabinet was a revolving door of different personalities and faces, this administration, apart from who was Mike Waltz was the guy, the national security advisor. I think he's only really the only head to roll so far in this administration to be, resign or whatnot. I remember Trump in his first administration, he had felt like 5 attorney generals. So it was crazy. He had multiple heads of the CEI. I guess knock on wood, but at this point, Pam Bondi should resign. And should Republicans keep stomping on rakes, bashing themselves in the head unnecessarily, should Democrats take power again in November, well, technically it'll be until January, and they set up all these committees, they set up all of these things, and they start to impeach Pam Bondi. impeach Kash Patel. And you know, at that point, they deserve it. If you're not smart enough to protect yourself, then why am I going to feel bad for you when things end up coming back around? You put yourself in that position. If you did your job, then first of all, A, you probably won't lose, you almost definitely lose the midterms no matter what. But you won't lose them as badly as you could. I mean, you're barely holding on to the house as is. So to think that you're not going to lose a house is a pipe dream. But maybe you still keep it relatively thin. That's the best case scenario. But right now, this administration can't stop bullshitting themselves. And in effect, bullshitting their supporters. It's disappointing and it's frustrating. And it's the same sentiment that I got when I watched the State of the Union. All rhetoric. It's going to be little to no action, no effect, no impact. Just recharging the base as always. Got to throw some gasoline on the fire. Throw some leaves into the pit to make it light up a little bit. I like him attacking Democrats. I think the traps are useful. But if you're going to instigate and you're going to antagonize, you better have a plan of attack. Don't go kicking a bee's nest without a suit on and come crying to me if you don't wear a suit that you got stung. Because that's what the GOP is going to do in 28. Once, in 26, if, they lose the midterms, they have all these hearings, right? Trump's still in power. So they're only going to really halt whatever they're currently doing anyway. Legislation is pretty much going to be dead at that point. 28, all that antagonizing, all that instigation is going to rear its ugly head. And I don't know if Vance is going to be the guy. Seems like Rubio is starting to build a profile. You could see them on the same ticket, potentially. But to be fair, I don't know. I think there's a chance that the guy who ends up being the nominee, dark horse candidate, might not be in the administration. Might be an outside guy. Might be an outsider. Outside of the administration. Now, I would probably say that it's probably 80% chance it's going to be Vance. I mean, it's going to be barring something unforeseen. I only think it's going to be, I don't think the issue is if it's going to be Vance. I think it'll be Vance, but I think that he'll still lose. I think that you see the Democrats kind of taking advantage of the building frustration from this administration, the instigation, because Trump's not making it easy to defend himself or his record or his agenda or his administration. And from that point, Democrats, if they run like a Newsom Fetterman, who's coming, I mean, he's a guy who had a stroke and he seems like the most reasonable guy in DC. Unbelievable. You could see Fetterman having a really dark horse impact on the Democrat primary in 28. I really do believe that. Now he may not run, but he'll be the model. Though if Fetterman does not run, they will look to find someone like Fetterman and run. Now I think that Fetterman will be pushed hard to run. I don't think it'll be someone like Shapiro, because I don't think the Democrats are going to elect a Jew like that. I think that Gretchen's going to throw her hat in. Wes Moore's going to throw his hat in. And in 28, You might see a semi-moderated Democrat Party who rallies together, and it's not even going to be that Vance is a quote-unquote bad candidate. It's going to be because he is the vice president of the Trump administration, and a decent traction of the Trump base is going to be frustrated with the administration. They're going to be turned off from anybody from the Trump administration. And so if I'm Republicans and I see what John Fetterman's doing, I get nervous. And all they have to do is just enact their agenda and they will win. I guarantee it. You have to deport the illegals. You have to put pressure on companies. You pass the SAVE Act. Once you deport everyone, you pass the Equal Representation Act. You rewrite the rules of the census. You get voter ID. You get paper ballots. You control the mail-in ballots. You do that, and you will win. You'll win 28. Hell, you might even win 32. And then after 32, that's when the real competition starts back again. But, as Rupert Lowe said in his Restore Britain video, the solution is going to be difficult. It is going to be painful. But it is possible. And just like Reform UK, who said they were going to do it, they're up for the job. And they failed. They failed miserably. The people search for a more radical option. Trump is supposed to be the guy. If not Trump, then who? After all. Well, Britain got their guy. They found their guy. It seems like Rupert Lowe is going to be the guy who challenges Reform Britain, might end up playing spoiler, and pushes for accountability, at least regarding Reform UK. But I'm just warning MAGA right now. If you don't enact your agenda, if you don't start taking these issues seriously, you are going to spur on and create the demand for a more radical option. Because if Trump doesn't do what he said he's going to do, and the issues get worse, people will find someone else. And I don't think it's going to be J.D. Vance or Marco Rubio, ultimately, who's going to do it. So I'm going to take a look, see if there's any comments here from you guys. All right. All right. Fish back at 28. We talked about that a little bit on Monday. 600K total tops. And the Fed, we are Charlie Kirk, and Fetterman is completely bought. I don't know. I think he's reasonable. I think he's definitely a little bit level-headed there, and I think he represents a more moderate option. I really do. We should end the Federal Reserve, though. We should go back to the gold standard. I'm that kind of a conservative. If you didn't know, I actually had a whole video on end the Fed puppet. I don't know, man. I don't think Fetterman is that much of a puppet. Fishback in Florida is, of course, going to be a really interesting guy to watch, because he is really literally the embodiment of the online right. And so if you see someone like Fishback really putting a lot of pressure on a guy like Donalds, the fact that DeSantis isn't endorsing or supporting Donalds is huge. So I think that's really interesting. So in that way, I'm really interested to see that Florida race. Fishback interview with two actual neo-Nazis. I don't think was a good look. I didn't see that interview. I will have to check that out, but I don't know if he wins, but he definitely puts pressure on them, and the establishment is going to go against him like crazy. So this isn't a good idea. Yeah. So we'll definitely see, but yeah, like I said, guys, I really do want to kind of keep doing these streams more often. And I really kind of like the kind of in the moment, live, raw type of content like this. And so it's very kind of similar to the videos I already make now on the channel. So if you're new and you're not really too familiar with who I am or whatnot, I do have a channel, of course. It's The Right Side on YouTube. I'm also on Rumble. I'm also on X. You can find them all on my YouTube channel. If you like the content here, be sure to subscribe. Hit the like, helps with reach. If you like the content and you want this channel to kind of reach more people, then commenting, liking, of course, literally sharing it directly, but also subscribing also helps a lot with the reach. And so that's the best way to support the channel. If everything outside of course, financial capacities, but liking, commenting, and subscribing are free, and so it's a great way to on Rumble you would just follow, but it's the best way to kind of directly help the channel grow and catch more eyes and kind of build the community that we have going on here. And so with that, I'm looking forward to, I'll have another video out next week on Wednesday. I'm not exactly sure what the topic is just yet. This is kind of a slow week or slow season for politics as we kind of round out of the winter of the first year into the midterms. Everything kind of dies down a little bit. So it's going to be interesting. But I am going to do these streams more often in the future, hopefully at least once every other week, kind of in between the topic videos that I do on YouTube more regularly. I want to do these streams kind of in between those weeks, at least once, maybe two, maybe a couple. And so definitely looking forward to it. But yeah, like I said, if you enjoyed it, hit the like button, hit subscribe, hit follow if you're on Rumble. But with that said, I hope you guys enjoy your night and have a good one. Thanks for watching.